If things go according to plan, by the middle of June and possibly earlier, local town governments will be receiving the first of two installments of federal money allocated through the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, legislation that was passed earlier this year by the U.S. Congress to help municipalities and county governments across the country offset the negative economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity for local governments to offset extraordinary expenses incurred while fighting the pandemic and perhaps build back better by investing in services or infrastructure that will help boost economic trends and leave them better off than before. Between two channels of money, one oriented on a per capita basis for the towns and cities, and the other by county, about $300 per resident may be headed Vermont's way. But there are some strings attached. To get a better idea of what ARPA might hold for Vermont and local governments, we talked first with Ted Brady, who was recently named as the Executive Director of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns and was previously the Deputy Secretary of the state's Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
The state of Vermont is getting more than $1 billion that's pretty flexible from ARPA. And the state legislature and the governor are having conversations about how to spend that billion or so dollars. In addition, there's $113 million in a capital fund, which is meant for infrastructure. And that's another pot that the legislature and the governor are having conversations about what to do with that funding. And then in addition to that, there's about $200 million in ARPA money that's going directly to municipalities that each of our legislative bodies at our town level, city level, and village level will have to decide how to spend in accordance with the guidance that Treasury provides. And that Treasury guidance will tell states and tell towns, cities, and villages how that money needs to be distributed. It will be based on a population share, so each community will get a certain amount of dollars based on the size of their population, size of their community. The exact dollar figure is still up in the air. It's going to be close to that number. In the end, Vermont communities should get somewhere near $300 per capita, but that number could be less, it could be more, depending on what Treasury does with the guidance, depending on if there are communities that were not considered in the original allocations that have been shared. So that number is a real rough estimate. So here's what we do know. When Treasury issues the guidance, we expect the state of Vermont to issue a allocation table, and that will tell every community how much ARPA money they're going to have an opportunity to help them recover from the pandemic. That money is based on really three different components. Component one is what's called entitlement money, and that money will go to only the city of Burlington, because that's the only entitlement community we have in Vermont. Then there's non-entitlement money, and that $180 million or so will be distributed by population on two tracks. One based on town, city, and village government, and then the second on county government. Because we do not have general county government in Vermont, we do have some functioning county government for law enforcement and courts, but because we do not have a general county government, it is widely expected, and I think rightly so, that the county money will be distributed in a very similar way to that non-entitlement local money. So yes, for the citizens of Vermont, the really important thing to know is communities will be getting somewhere near $300 per capita to help them recover from the pandemic.
We also caught up with State Representatives Kathleen James and Seth Bongartz to fill us in further, but before some of the guidance from the U.S. Treasury Department had been released.
Accounts, very carefully counting to keep this out of your normal system and to make sure that it's very easy to track where it went and to make sure that it was spent appropriately. But I think infrastructure, it is for infrastructure. and largely, except for the back, which is kind of odd because this isn't infrastructure, the backfilling of lost revenue, but otherwise it's for infrastructure. But infrastructure can be a lot of things. It's not just sewer and water and broadband.
Yeah, so speaking specifically today about the ARPA plan funds that are going to be flowing directly to municipalities and counties, that's different, of course, from the $2.7 billion that will be flowing to Vermont through all of the streams. Obviously, there are going to be some strict reporting requirements, so you want to make sure you're keeping very careful track. But you have until the end of 2024 to spend these dollars. So set them aside for now. Wait until the guidance is clear. Go to some of the other available funds first. You've got a couple years to figure out the most strategic way to invest these dollars.
We also had a chance to talk with Nick Zayas, the town administrator of Arlington. He and the town select board have zeroed in on using the approximately $600,000 they expect to receive from the feds on a water and sewer project.
The general idea of this, with all of the caveats of we don't know exactly what the rules are, but from what we understand of the rules are going to be most or least stringent, most viable for water projects and sewer projects. So the Arlington Water Department is the residual claimant on all money we don't spend on other allowed expenses. So we have about 3 water projects to work on, and then 1 or 2 rest of government expenses that are COVID related and that we expect to be allowed. That includes digitization in the clerk's office and with the cemetery commissioners potentially. And then we're going to be seeking out a study on wastewater engineering for a proposed expansion or reuse of the Arlington School District's wastewater plant. So if those expenses are allowed, we'll be spending money on them. But the big projects are going to be in the water department near West Arlington, in Chiselville, and potentially some wells on South Road near the pump house.
So towns are being urged to sequester the money in a separate account as more guidance and information becomes available, and they will have about 3 years to determine how to spend it. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.